ever since I started advocating and organizing along class lines, I've been getting hit with the weirdest attacks. I've been attacked for having a house, attacked for talking to conservatives against imperialism. They just attacked me for tweeting a mainstream medical research paper. How real do you think the American left is about creating class consciousness and solidarity?
I think I read Thomas's book, his book before last on the liberal class. I think he kind of gets it. It's the classic attempt by self-identified liberals to feel good about themselves. That's what this is really about. It's about validating themselves. It's about kind of celebrating their moral righteousness and purity. It's not about political effectiveness. It's not really about helping anyone. And the energy of the left, there's a kind of circular firing squad where they spend most of their energy and time attacking you, Glenn Greenwald. This guy's just attacked right and left. Matt Taibbi, and I admire all three of you. And that's where all of their energy goes. And that again feeds into this notion of their own kind of moral superiority. But of course, they're not attacking the real centers of power, because if you do that, as my friend Julian Assange did, there's a real cost.
So when did what do you? I don't want to be. I want to be optimistic that at some point the people will be able to throw off the chains of their co-opters and all the garbage that has happened. With all these organizations that I just gave that litany of that have now been co-opted, from Bernie's Our Revolution to the Justice Democrats to Progressive Democrats, of all DSA, all of them nowhere to be found at a Medicare for All march. It's just amazing. That shows you that. So what is there going to be a trigger? I mean, I thought these lockdowns, because none of the country did it like this. Every other country, if they locked you down, they tried to pay most of your salary. They didn't do that here in the United States. What do you think? If that didn't do it, what will something do it, you think?
Well, there already is a backlash. The problem is the backlash is a right-wing proto-fascist backlash. And that backlash has the same kind of roots: the rupture of social bonds, the insecurity, the lack of a future, the frustration, the feeling of neglect. And unless the left begins to address that very real, what Durkheim calls anomie, but that angst and that suffering, and it's a legitimate suffering, then we're finished politically. And that's why I really blame the left, and in particular the self-identified left or liberal class within the Democratic Party, for feeding this kind of proto-fascism. I mean, never forget that Trump didn't create this. This was really created by the Christian fascists. I wrote a book called American Fascists, the Christian Right in the War in America, and I got a lot of heat for using the word fascist. But I'm a seminary graduate. I grew up in the church. I'm both biblically and theologically literate, and these people are heretics. Jesus did not come to make us rich. Jesus does not bless the white race above other races, and in particular the American white race. Jesus wouldn't bless the dropping of iron fragmentation bombs and militarized drones in the Middle East, et cetera, et cetera. So they've sacralized the worst elements of American capitalism and American imperialism. Trump tapped into that, and what comes with it, of course, is this kind of magical thinking where people are so beaten down by a reality-based universe that has discarded them in many ways, that they walk into this world of God will address their material needs and take care of them and all this kind of. And of course, this movement is bankrolled by the most retrograde elements of American capitalism, Purdue, Walmart, Hobby Lobby, all these people, because if Jesus takes care of you, then you don't need universal health care. You don't need a union because Jesus is going to take care of you. So it's a very pernicious movement, and it's only going to grow. I mean, at the end of that book, I spent 2 years on it, I came to the conclusion that the only way to thwart it was to reintegrate these people back into the economy. We're not going to win an argument about creationism or whether Adam and Eve rode a T-Rex with a saddle in the Garden of Eden, as I saw in the Creationist Museum in Peterborough, Kentucky. And this is the failure. The left in this country has forgotten the fundamental importance of economics and the fundamental issue, which is class warfare, which we're losing. And of course, they've written all these people off, and many of them are my own family. I come from rural, lower class Maine on my mother's side, and many of them support Trump, and they hold opinions that I find repugnant about, all sorts of people and issues. But the suffering that they endure is real. And we have to go in and address that suffering, address that economic assault. And by not doing it, by essentially celebrating ourselves as moral arbiters and as righteous people, and a lot of this has to do now with kind of linguistic, shaming and all this kind of stuff. You know it better than I do. We're finished. We're finished. We're ceding the ground to very, very dangerous forces that may indeed, after the next House elections, take control.
So I hear a lot of people who I call it the establishment left, the boutique left, also say things like we have to organize along class lines, and they don't mean it for a second. They don't mean it, because what that means, organizing along class lines, means organizing with Trump voters. That's what that means. And they won't ever allow you to even talk to them, right? If I go on Tucker Carlson to talk to half the country, I get pilloried for it, even though I'm bringing a progressive message. Even after Tucker Carlson credited me with changing his mind about Julian Assange, which means half the country now hears that message. I mean, so they don't want, so that's what drives me crazy, right? We have to, when you organize along class lines, that means you find common ground. A lot of people on the right want to end the wars. They're now for single payer. A lot of them are for student debt relief. A lot of them are always for a living wage. That's enough stuff to organize a political party around. And now if either side wants to get elected, they have to come to us. That's my idea. I'm trying to do that with Nick Brana over at the People's Party. What do you think of that idea?
Of course. Lord Salisbury, who was a shit, but I mean, he said there are no permanent allies. There's only permanent power. Saul Alinsky picked this up too. When I sued Barack Obama over Section 1021 of the National Defense Authorization Act, there were a series of amicus briefs from libertarians, Ron Paul, all this kind of people. There are many issues I disagree with them on, but on that we found common ground around civil liberties. So yes, of course we do. I mean, that's the point. But I think we have to understand that the motive of the left is not to be effective. The motive of the left is to celebrate themselves. And if you understand that, then everything, how ineffectual they are, everything they do and say makes sense. It's not about political effectiveness. It's not about. It's about building a monument to themselves, and they've certainly done that.
So. Let's talk about, speaking of Alan Dershowitz, he is also named in the Epstein scandal. He wrote a book called The Case for Vaccine Mandates. I'd just like to get your thoughts on the vaccine mandates and passports. So
I got the vaccine.
Me too. Me too.
And you you had health issues over it.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact is these things were rolled out without proper vetting. That's real, and I think people's concerns are real. And that was a decision that I made to get it, but I also understand how people are wary about it because these things were turbocharged, and of course, these corporations are making staggering profits from disseminating it throughout the market. And I am quite certain in the history of pharmaceuticals, the tobacco industry, the animal ag industry, everything else bears this out, that they work very hard to bury the negative consequences. So I have a certain sympathy. On the other hand, with the Delta variant now, and I think, perhaps we should call it a new name rather than a variant, it's more virulent and more dangerous. So, that was a decision that I made.
What do you I've seen the politicization of COVID around because of Trump. not only by Trump, but by people anti-Trump. I remember when Trump was pushing for Operation Warp Speed to get the vaccines as fast as possible, people like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were on debate stages saying that they were skeptical of it, right? Because it was Trump. It's like the left is willing to be anti-science and to somehow dunk on Trump. And do you see that ever end? When does that ever end?
Well, let's remember that the left. So what is the left? The left is that anointed left that you hear Rachel Maddow supposedly on MSNBC. The radical left doesn't have a voice on the supposedly liberal media outlets. It doesn't have a voice. When I worked for the New York Times, Noam Chomsky's name was unofficially, there was nothing written, never appeared in the newspaper. Now, Noam Chomsky is, I would argue, America's greatest intellectual, although there are issues that I disagree with Noam on, including third parties, but I admire him. My whole understanding of the liberal class, of manufacturing consent, his fantastic book on Israel, The Fateful Triangle. I mean, he's a giant. And so, where's Noam? Where's Ralph? Where are all the people who were right about the war in Afghanistan? Danny Shorson graduated from West Point, did combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, had the courage to call it out. Matthew Ho, where are they? They may be on alternative media, your show, The Gray Zone, something else. But these are the voices, and I know because I was the Middle East bureau chief for the New York Times, spoke out against the invasion of Iraq, and I'm watching all these yahoos, cited as experts on the Middle East. They don't. I speak Arabic. I spent 7 years there. I don't think they've, maybe they did a junket to, a beach resort off of Tel Aviv, paid for by the Israeli government, but they don't know anything about the Middle East. But they were parroting back the dominant narrative. The journalists parroted back, George Packer, all these kind of people, because it was good for their career. They didn't know anything about the Middle East. I mean, they were attacking me by name. And so, in fact, we have to also concede that the real left, with a spine, with a backbone, with a real critique, has been banished from the mainstream media landscape.
Yeah, I think that real left should get together, and I bet we could fit in a phone booth. I really don't. There's not. We don't. Yeah, everybody's going to get to sit in the front seat.
Well, it'll make it easy when they come to get us.
That's right. That's right. Well, in your book Unspeakable, you address many issues that are deemed too radical or true for public consumption. And one of them is animal agriculture. And you even talked about how George McGovern took on the meat and dairy industries, and you said his career was finished. So can you speak about the harms of this industry and how much power this industry has?
Well, I became a vegan, not so much for health issues, for environmental reasons. The health and the speciesism, I'm not against it. But the animal ag industry is a major contributor to global warming. I think 70% of the Amazon is cut down for soy to feed cattle, the runoff from pig farms, the industrial ag industry in the Midwest. And of course, they're all shot full of antibiotics. And this is contributing, I think 80% of antibiotics are used for animals. This is contributing to all sorts of diseases now that are antibiotic resistance. This comes out of the animal ag industry. And it's like the tobacco industry. I mean, they're very effective and they co-opt all these groups, the American Heart Association, everything else, the same way corporate money has destroyed all of the organizations that you listed, starting with MoveOn.org. Remember, that was a single payer outfit. And next thing you know, they're saying we can't be against Obama's Obamacare, which was a corporate giveaway, because it'll hurt Obama. I mean, so the animal ag industry is another one that kind of gets away with all this stuff. And it is interesting that after the Democratic Party leadership and the Republican Party leadership united to destroy McGovern, McGovern remained a senator, and then he had hearings on the animal ag industry, and that's when they went after a Senate seat, and he never held political office again.
So, in your article, Dying for an iPhone, You write of horrendous conditions at Foxconn factories. Foxconn's largest customer is Apple.
Yeah.
But it also produces products for Amazon and other large companies. And you write that workers in these factories got to organize globally. What is the why can't now? I remember after the 2016 election and Trump got elected, I turned to Cenk Uygur and I said, hey, let's do something tangible and big. Why don't we go organize the Walmart workers in California? Of course, that's when I found out he was anti-union. But what is stopping someone from frickin' doing that?
The power of Walmart. I mean, so if AOC and the squad want to do something useful, that's exactly right. I mean, Walmart's one of the most evil corporations in America. Not only because it uses slave labor in China to produce its products, but because it goes into towns, creates these big box stores that destroys the local economy. So much of my family comes from Norway, Maine, and there's a big Walmart, and the main street in Norway is just empty, boarded up stores, and they pay minimum wage. They keep people working 28 hours a week because then they qualify for food stamps. So we get to subsidize the Walton family fortune, and they stagger people when they come in for employment because they have very effective union busting. In fact, they have union busting teams that as soon as they smell any kind of organism, these vultures come in on Learjets to break it, and they vacuum all the money out of every community they're in. That's a useful role for the left, or the recent organizing attempts by miners in Alabama, or that's where we have to go. That's it. And you know what? Some of those people are going to be Trump supporters, and I've dealt with them. We don't have to embrace, and we can even be public that we don't embrace it. But the primary, as Ralph always said, if you went into a Walmart and you told a Walmart worker who was making $10 an hour, we want to raise your wage to $15 or $20 an hour. Whatever political divide or cultural divide you have is going to vanish around that issue. The primacy of economic issues, basic security, universal health care. I mean, look what's happening to public utilities. Kucinich writes about this in his memoir, are all being privatized, prices jacked up, people are about to be thrown out on the streets, schools, whether it's Arnie Duncan under Obama or Betsy DeVos under Clinton, are being turned into money-making charter militarized schools that teach people basic numerical literacy so they can stack shelves and stay exactly in the kind of lower echelon of the working class they're meant to stay in. I mean, these are the real issues. But that means confronting entrenched power. It means organizing. And I would add that it's the opposite of what you see, for instance, in that clip with AOC, because real organizing is not about the cult of the self, which has infected the left as it has infected the rest of the society. It's about self-effacement. It's about empowering the other. It's about building real relationships, which takes time. And as organizing does. And I think that the whole I'm not connected with social media on purpose. There is a Twitter account, but I don't run it. I'm not on Facebook. That's how I don't see your tweets, Jimmy, because I don't read any Twitter. And so much of that use of social media is really about it's not about truth and it's not about communication. It's about self-presentation. It's what Neil Borstein calls the life movie in whoever watches it, and all of these political figures, especially AOC, have this have imbibed this particular culture and that cult of the self, and they're quite adept at it. But we have to see it for what it is.
So, do you know, I saw you do a show recently with Richard Wolff. Do you know if he is single, and does that explain his apartment?
He's not single.
Oh, okay. I also saw in that same show, I saw a reflection of a dog in the glass. Do you live with the dog?
I have 2 rescue greyhounds.
Oh, nicely done. Do they bite?
No. They love everybody. They're useless as guard dogs. They sleep 18 hours a day. The only thing they don't like are little dogs. So I have to be kind of careful when I walk them because they'll go for the little, the little boutique, the little designer dogs. Yeah, they think they're rabbits.
And do you know that you share a birthday with Fred Willard?
I don't. I share a birthday with Samuel Johnson. That's a little more meaningful.
Oh, okay. Well, not to me. But anyway. The Jimmy Dore Show is coming to a city near you August 28th. We're in Las Vegas at the Plaza, and we just added another show in Portland. We're there in Portland on September 10th and 11th. October 3rd, we're at Harlow's in Sacramento. More dates being added. Go to jimmydoorecomedy.com for a link for all tickets. See you at a live show.